everyone. My name is Jeehae Fischer, Executive Director of the Korean American Family Service Center. KAFSC provides comprehensive social services to immigrant survivors of gender-based violence in a culturally sensitive and linguistically competent way. I'll be your moderator for today's virtual conversation on what does it mean to be Asian American during this critical time. For those joining in now, a quick moment for housekeeping. Look for the interpretation icon, the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select the language you want to hear. We'll be offering Korean interpretation with the help of Fran Yoon, our interpreter for today's conversation. 오늘 심포지엄 한국어로 들으실 수 있습니다. 줌 화면 창 아래 메뉴 한국 국기 아이콘을 누르시면 됩니다. I would like to introduce our panelists, amazing panelists that we have who joined today. Thank you to the US Congresswoman Grace Meng, who is serving her 5th term in the United States House of Representatives. Grace represents the 6th Congressional District of New York, encompassing the New York City Borough of Queens, including West, Central, and Northeast Queens. Grace is the first and only Asian American member of Congress from New York State and the first female Congress member from Queens since former vice presidential nominee Geraldine Ferraro. We're also joined by Deputy Queensborough President Rhonda Binda. Raised in Southeast Queens, is a visionary leader with a passion for social and environmental justice. In her youth, Rhonda successfully lobbied the New York City Council for New York Public Interest Group to shut down Fresh Kills, the largest toxic site in the country. As an attorney, she represented and released wrongly detained clients before the U.S. Immigration Court of Appeals after 9/11 pro bono and broke up internet and cable monopolies. In government, she served in both the Obama-Biden and Clinton-Gore administrations as a U.S. diplomat and in the West Wing. Finally, founder and CEO of Peach and Lily, Alicia Yoon, a Korean skincare expert, as her acclaimed Peach and Lily skincare collection is 100% worry-free, non-toxic, and cruelty-free, using clinically proven ingredients. She has helped make Korean beauty the phenomenon it is in the US today. An esthetician certified by spas in Korea and licensed in New York, Alicia is also a Harvard Business School graduate and is an avid sheet masker. Thank you for joining us here today for an honest discussion on what does it mean to be Asian American. We will be covering the diversity of Asian identities, challenges, and barriers faced over the years, what we can do to build trust and engage communities in the ongoing violence against Asian Americans with our panelists. I want to make clear that all Asian Americans who are understandably feeling hurt and afraid right now and wondering whether anyone else in America cares, we see you, we stand with you, and everyone here today is doing everything in our power to protect you. So I'm gonna, the very first question will go to Congresswoman Grace Meng. You're a trailblazer for Asian American women, especially in the arena of politics. You have been a champion for human rights, women's issues, and racial justice consistently. Last year, you introduced the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, and yesterday, we received great news. The Senate passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. Can you please describe the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act and its protections for Asian Americans and victims of hate?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeehae, for having me here today. And as always, we are incredibly grateful for the work that you and the entire KAFSC team does for so many of our constituents, so many who otherwise wouldn't have a voice to speak up for them. It's always an honor to be in the presence of my colleague, our Deputy Borough President, Rhonda Binda. Her office has really been leading the charge in making sure that our diverse communities in Queens are convening on a regular basis and making sure that we are not just living side by side working side by side here in Queens, but actually making effective change together. And thank you, Alicia Yoon, for the work that you do. So impressed with your success as well. Look, our community has really been dealing with this at a very increased level for over the past year. We introduced legislation that would basically do a couple of things. This legislation would provide more funding for community organizations. It would establish dedicated personnel at the Department of Justice to actually review these cases. There's no real centralized process right now, from the guidance to local law enforcement on how to investigate these cases and what types of things they should be on the lookout for, all the way to if and when they reach to the levels, up to the levels of the federal government. We don't really have an accurate and full picture of what's happening, where it's happening, and how it's happening. This legislation would also make it easier for victims to report these incidents and hopefully have a way to report them in multiple languages as well. But I do want to make clear that the goal of this legislation is not necessarily to prosecute and lock more people up for hate crimes. The goal is to help our community members at the most grassroots levels, to help the organizations that have literally been on the front lines, often doing the work like KAFSC, that government should be providing more help in doing. And so we want to make sure that our resources at the grassroots level are strong and that we're providing resources to hopefully be able to prevent these types of incidents going forward. It has passed the Senate yesterday. This Zoom is very timely, and hopefully we'll get it through the House in the next few weeks and to the president's desk for signature.
Thank you so much for all your work, Congresswoman Grace Meng. And yes, we received great news, and we hope to continue to receiving great news. So the second question will go to the Deputy Borough President, Rhonda Binda. So following Queens Borough President Helen Marshall, you're the second female Guyanese American to be in an executive position at Queens Borough President's Office. As the most diverse borough in New York City, with Asians making up the largest minority group in the borough, and also the COVID-19, also the borough where our immigrant community members were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. What initiatives and efforts are being made to address the rise in bias and hate incidents? What changes are being made through policies, legislation, and partnerships to help our Asian American community be safe?
Thank you so much, Jeehae and KFCS and Helen. It really is an honor to be here with our champion, Congresswoman Grace Meng, and with our entrepreneur, Alicia Yoon. I look up to you both so much, and so thankful for the partnership that KFCS has had, even many years before I arrived here a few months ago at Borough Hall. Thank you for mentioning Helen Marshall. I do look to live in her legacy and to make her proud. Guyanese American community, as you know, is the second largest diaspora here in Queens, and I think maybe the fifth in New York City, but we're sort of a quiet group. We don't have a lot of people who have entered public life and public office over the years. Helen was really the only one, and we have a few more that are now in Queens, our district leaders and so forth. So it really does not fall lightly on me. I feel like I have to be a voice for the community. And so thank you for recognizing that. But as the Congresswoman said, the Queens was the epicenter for COVID, and we did see that all of the fault lines that had already existed were exacerbated among disparities in Queens. And the Congresswoman is doing amazing work at the federal level. It's National Crime Victims Week. DOJ has made changes procedurally, but what we're seeing is that on the ground, when there is a crisis, we're not always seeing that we're cooperating enough at the grassroots level. And even with the election of our Vice President Kamala Harris, Asian American woman, pointing back to the lack of representation that we have here in New York at the local level. And so we've been very active. We were, I think, the first to call a press conference in Queens on anti-Asian hate crimes in conjunction with the Jewish community that had also seen a spike in anti-Semitism over the past year. I think there's a lot that we can learn from working with the Jewish community, who has been, I think, more outspoken than we have over the years on this issue. We held a town hall on Tuesday, and all of these resources are available on our YouTube channel with the city. And Borough President Donovan Richards, I'm so grateful for his leadership as the Borough President, because when he was in the City Council, he did work on creating the hate crimes unit at NYPD. And so we have a very good relationship with them and have been looking to expand that. But way before these was called hate crimes, they were called bias crimes in the United States. Even though, for example, Chinese Americans, have a long history in this country dating back a couple hundred years, why are we still seeing these problems happening over and over again to any new group? And, you can probably go back to the times of the Pilgrims. Anytime there's a new ethnic group or new religious group, we're still having the same issue. And I think it really goes back to the achievement that the Congresswoman has made at the federal level that's forcing us to really look at the data. It's almost like history repeating itself for so many different communities. And unless that we have this information that can help us use an evidence-based policy approach, I don't know if it will change. So a couple of things that the Borough Hall is doing. So in addition to, we're having a number of forums, we're having 2 upstander trainings, one in Korean and one in Mandarin coming up. And we're working with the Congresswoman on a march to really bring more awareness and show the unity and partnerships that we're forming by meeting with individual communities and groups and connecting them as we have been over the past few months. We are also opening up an immigrant welcome center because, we also, coming from immigrant communities, have to take a look at our action. And it's not just about, reading the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and getting sworn in for your citizenship. Becoming American and being American is also, you have to adapt the values, which, freedom of speech is one that we cherish, but we have to learn how to use that. And I know that, even in my culture, we are so diverse in Guyana. We have 5 different, ethnicities. That's nothing compared to Queens. Queens has, hundreds of languages. And so we all have to learn about working and living in a multicultural society. Especially those of us who live in Queens, we have a lot more work to do. It's almost harder for us in a sense, even though we're all living together, there's so much to learn from each other. And so with the Immigrant Welcome Center, and I know that the Congresswoman also has legislation on this too at the national level, we're trying to catch up with her essentially. What can we do at the local level so all of our groups like yours can work together? So there's more that we're doing. I'm happy to chat about it throughout the discussion. But just know that Queensborough President Donovan Richards is, working hand in hand with the Congresswoman. I believe they were at a press conference a few days ago, at least once or twice this week. And we're trying to train people who are the majority of the people from Queens. I think 40% are foreign born. How to use your rights as an American. We have the Constitution, we have the Bill of Rights, but as we've seen in this country, justice has not been evenly applied. We saw some progress achieved with the George Floyd verdict, but we have a ways to go, and we have to claim and take ownership in those values and those rights, and learn to speak up more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deputy Borough President Rhonda, Binda, and
But I still don't have the
KAFSC stood with both Congresswomen and the Borough President's team, also with Rhonda, Binda, to really speak out against anti-Asian hate that are happening and has risen recently. So we thank you sincerely for providing the space where we could speak up and speak out. Now I'm going to ask a question to Alicia. So recently you wrote an article, which I have read, about your experience as a naturalized US citizen and how this past year has brought your identity as an Asian American entrepreneur into sharp focus. Peach and Lily has consistently championed women's issues and issues of racial equality. How do you hope to achieve change through the platform of Peach and Lily? How do you see corporate social responsibility and philanthropy influence culture and be an agent of change?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me on this great panel. And, thank you so much for all of the work that you do with KAFSC. It's really incredible to see, the relentless work that's being done for our community. And thank you so much to Congresswoman Grace for, this bill. So many Asians across the country, just to see this is really strengthening and uplifting for us. And thank you, Deputy Borough President Rhonda, for all the work you do. Queens is, I actually lived there as part of my childhood. And, it's amazing to see how, everything has been tackled over this past very, very challenging year. So yeah, thank you so much to all of you. I think first, I would like to say that there has to be this belief that corporations have a place and an ability to make a positive impact, affect change societally. And I truly believe that businesses are uniquely positioned with both the ability and the capability to make meaningful contributions. So I think it first starts with that understanding that you have if you're working, in a for-profit business. I also think that, at the end of the day, really thinking about how is your specific business, your specific industry uniquely positioned to affect change. So, whether you're a business that's very integrated into the industry because you're working in business to business, that's your business model, or in our case, we have a direct to consumer business. And so you have a platform, right? So you have a community that is, you are able to reach people. You are also integrated as a business into an overall industry where as a peer in the industry, you can actually mobilize other companies in your industry as well. And companies look at each other within the industry. So I think that's, one key thing to think through. I also want to mention that it's not just big businesses that can affect change. I actually really believe that this idea of giving back to the community, thinking about corporate social responsibility, if that's not thought through and embedded into your business model, your business DNA, your company culture when you're small, it's harder to do that when you're big. So for Peach and Lily, we're 9 years old, but we started, for example, partnering with Restored New York City 6 years ago when we were still a much younger company. And they do great work in helping to stop sex trafficking in New York and now more broadly in the US. What it looked like, 6 years ago when we partnered with them was different. Yes, we were giving back financially and having cash donations, but we were also finding creative ways to use our platform to raise awareness, finding creative ways to support some of the survivors, even, having their events in our offices and so forth. And that grew to us becoming one of their largest financial donors. And, I think there are, creative ways to think about this. So for example, we're in the beauty space. Beauty is an inherently emotional category. And when it comes to racism, oftentimes it's when entire people groups are flattened into one-dimensional harmful stereotypes. Beauty brands have this unique ability to have representation in their marketing campaigns to bring about this richness and nuanced view of, for example, in this case, what Asians look like, what their personal ambitions might be, and really be an antidote to some of the root causes of racism in a very powerful, visual, visceral way. And that's something unique to beauty. So I, really encourage businesses to think about how to get uniquely involved. The other thing I really want to highlight is when I have conversations with fellow folks in business, sometimes there is this misunderstanding that it comes at a cost to your business. And when you really think about it, it's beneficial to everyone involved, including your business, to your consumers, because consumers are aligned to brands because of their values. So speaking up about what your values are and taking action, as well as it's beneficial to your partners and the larger community. So I would just really say that for businesses, it starts with that belief that you have the ability and the responsibility, but also to know that it doesn't have to come at a trade-off, and it actually could be very beneficial to everyone. Plus, I really do believe it is the right thing for companies to think about this. So, I think especially this past year, as it's been challenging for so many across our country because of the pandemic, and I think also specifically for Asians across the country for this dramatic rise in hate, it's been a challenging time, but also a very productive time to have these conversations with fellow founders and entrepreneurs and business people to think about what can we do to help stop this Asian hate.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for your answer. So what I'm hearing from all of you, you both, each and every panelist have a very critical role that you're playing in the community, in the society, nationally, locally, all different levels. And we are very thankful for all your knowledge and passion and also love for Asian Americans and their well-being. In your respective areas of leadership, can you describe, this is a question for everyone, can you describe the ultimate goal you hope to achieve? This is a big question for all of you. And how are you accomplishing that mission? I'm going to start with Congresswoman Grace.
Oh, this is a big question. And I don't know if I'll answer it completely, but I will say, as a woman, as an Asian American working in the world of government and politics, my goal is really just to make sure that our voices are at the table. That saying, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. Right now in this time and in our history, I'm really trying to not just be able to participate in spaces like this where we're able to talk about our traditional underrepresentation in this country's history, and how we can work to support not just people in our community, but to support other communities as well. But sometimes the more challenging conversations are with people who might not necessarily understand where we're coming from and might not have the tools to sort of expand that solidarity and allyship. And these days, as we're talking so much about the racism that's aimed at our community, I think it's just as important to talk about the intolerance and racism that may exist within our own communities and our own networks as well. I will say that that has been the most challenging. I want to make sure that I was on a panel with the national NAAC president, Derek Johnson, and he said something that really resonated with me about the importance of being a friend before you need a friend. If you ask me today what I want our community to know, it's that. I want them to understand that we fight as hard as we can for our own community, but we have to be present in the fights of other communities as well. And we have to understand how to be a friend and how to be an ally. And there have been many rooms where I've been in, where I've been the only Asian or only woman. And in rooms, for example, especially in the world of politics, if I'm the only Asian, for example, and I've tried, to take that next step. And oftentimes there aren't Asians around me who can validate or to speak up for me. But oftentimes there will, for example, be maybe my Black colleague who will say, I'm not Asian, but I think that Asian American voices need to be at the table. And I just want to make sure that we're looking out for each other's communities, because only when we move forward in solidarity can we really make progress. There's too much of, finger pointing at each other's communities sometimes. And I really think that you and I, our generation, has to be the ones to take our community's progress to the next level. Our parents' generation, many of them are new to this country or newish, and they might not have the tools and the language to be able to do that. And this is our responsibility as our generation to make sure that our voices are at the table and that we're supporting other communities as they're, trying to achieve more equity as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. I would like to hear from Rhonda this time.
Thank you, Jeehae. Thank you, Congresswoman, for sharing more about your experience and the direction that we can take together to support you. You already know that at Queensborough Hall, Donovan Richards Jr. is very active in helping all of our services become more culturally competent. We partner with your office and others that are closer to various communities. And so I think that, the only way that, similar to the approach that we took for healthcare in finding more culturally competent vaccination sites and testing sites, this is the same approach that we are looking to take with the passage of the bill, that as we're collecting data, we have to make sure we have people in place that can actually collect the data in languages that that we'll need, and that we can, better, continue this civil rights effort movement that I think the former generation, like the Congresswoman said, was able to bring it just so far. We've seen the spirit and the energy of the younger generation taking it forward with Black Lives Matters last year, and everything that we're seeing now as we, take the streets on to this issue. It is up to, I think, us and them to let's see what we can, like with data, using technology, for example, partnering with corporations in the private sector more as they become much more socially involved. And let's think of new ways to tackle this problem so we snuff it out once and for all. And what our goal at Queensborough Hall is not necessarily to homogenize everyone, sorry, to homogenize everyone, because we are proud of who we are. We want everyone to be able to still recognize where they came from and to speak in their languages and to practice, all of the beautiful things from their culture. And that's what makes Queens Queens. What we're trying to do is bridge the government and how we approach justice, how we approach healthcare, and making it more culturally competent. So I think for us, as we look to bring more equity, it's not about necessarily making everybody the same, but we're really striving to come out of the pandemic much more aware and much more culturally aware of how we can better provide government services.
Thank you so much. Alicia?
Yes, for us, our ultimate mission, we are a skincare company. So our direct mission is to help as many people be empowered on their skincare journey. I struggled a lot with eczema, so this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. And in that process, really empower them positively. But I think, the overarching thinking is, around this idea of empowerment. And so, that's why, for example, with Restore New York City, we were thinking, there are these incredibly disenfranchised people in our community who are not empowered. How can we help as a company to think about that? And so, that's kind of been our long-term nonprofit partner. But as things come up, we see that there's areas where we can really help people, be more empowered and make a difference there. So, more recently with, helping to stop Asian hate, speaking up about it, right? As a basic first step that I would love to see more companies do across the board. And, because I'm in the beauty industry, especially in the beauty industry. And then, finding ways to raise awareness, helping to debunk myths, giving back financially to specific organizations. So this notion of being a company that thinks about empowering everyone in our community and how we can incorporate that into our business. And so that's ultimately our mission statement.
Thank you all for all your answers. And the overarching theme that I'm hearing from all of you is that the allyship, the friendship with everyone is very important. All coming from different sectors, different positions. However, the overarching theme that I'm hearing is this partnerships with one another. Which is very encouraging for me to hear. So thank you for all the thoughtful answers. The next question is, as you are embarking your different missions or pushing for your agenda and goals, I'm sure there are a lot of barriers that you all had to face in so many different ways. And so I would like to just ask all of you, what are some barriers that you have overcome, and especially as an Asian or Caribbean Americans, or maybe as a woman in your profession? We'll start with Congresswoman Grace.
So I did touch upon something that I really do feel like is relevant to this question before, where I've been in many rooms, spaces where I was the only Asian American. And I'll give you one example. I was trying to get on a certain committee because there were no Asian Americans on the appropriations committee. I had to lobby X number of members to get onto this committee. I was not their choice. They had other people in mind. And I really felt strongly that the entire appropriations committee of the Congress should have at least one Asian American voice. And the people that spoke up for me were not other Asian Americans, because they weren't in the room of the people I had to lobby. And it was some of my Black and Latino colleagues who spoke up because they felt that it was important for there to be an Asian American voice on that committee. And that's just one example, not because it helped me get onto a committee I wanted, but to show why we need to understand and to support each other's communities. And I will say that over the past year, watching all these incidents have really helped me to become more comfortable in my skin as an Asian American. Growing up as a kid in Queens, we all have stories where we can remember people making fun of our eyes or our food or our, culture. People asking how we know how to speak English so well, or telling us to go back somewhere. And oftentimes I either kept quiet about it. I didn't bother explaining to my parents who were next to me because they didn't understand what they were making fun of us about. Or the few times I did bring it up, the person who said those things would just brush it off and say, "I'm just joking. Can't you take a joke?" And so it's a lifetime of Asian Americans experiencing different treatment like that. And, I wasn't necessarily in any physical danger from my experiences, but, I will say that watching these attacks on the elderly, watching the murders that happened in Atlanta. And when I went down to Atlanta, I met with some of the families of the victims, and I actually thanked them because I said that their moms' experience, their story, their history, their sacrifices really brought to light the importance of me as an Asian American, and for so many across the country, maybe for the first time, that our Asian American stories are just as American as anyone else. I kind of grew up thinking, my parents' jobs and our upbringing and what they do, it's weird, it's not conventional, it's not American enough. But it's really made me think like, our stories, our experiences, they're just as American as anyone else. And, that's something that I think I've struggled a lot over my life to be comfortable with and to get over.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of us in this virtual room could relate to the upbringing experiences that you just mentioned. Well, thank you for the honest answer. I will go to the Deputy Borough President, Rhonda.
Thank you. And I just want to just echo some of the same points that Congresswomen pointed out. Vice President Harris talks about, herself often also being the only woman in the room, the only, Caribbean or South Asian or African-American woman in the room. But I think that the Congressman really embodies of what we should be striving for, which is what the Vice President says, that remember that you're representing so many more people. You're not there alone, and to have the courage to speak up, and then also eventually bring a chair for another person to have a voice as well that, is either, from your group or another diverse voice. And so I'm trying to do that also here at Borough Hall, but it's not always easy because like the Congresswoman, I wasn't always necessarily proud of being different. And it's something that I'm learning to do, is just being more open with, my own, personal history and culture and the things that I've gone through. So it helps that so many movements over the past few years, including the Me Too and Time's Up movement, has really encouraged us to use our voice more. So that's always been a challenge. And I think, somewhat of a personal challenge for me, but I think that the community also, we face some challenges and some barriers, like we talked about partnership and working together. And that's why we're really trying at Borough Hall under President Richard's leadership, is to be a convening of so many different groups. So we're really trying to help with breaking down those barriers among our organization. So, including thank you for your partnership on so many of the programs and initiatives that we've launched, including gender justice. I know you've all participated in that. And also thank you to Alicia for your leadership, being, one of the only female Asian voices and CEOs, but encouraging your colleagues to also look at things the way that you see them and to be more expansive and multicultural, because I can't say enough about that, especially in the area of beauty and the impact that has. So, I would say that, the working together, we do see that we have laws on the books, but unless we're able to speak up and speak out about it, then they're just sort of in name alone. So another challenge that I've had is, and I think that the community has, is learning to really come out and speak up. And so that's why I appreciate you hosting this panel, so that we can, talk a little bit more about what does that mean, and will you be counted? And how do we make sure that when our voices are heard and that more of our stories are heard and told in media?
Thank you so much, Rhonda, again, for your answer. So before I move on to onto Alicia, unfortunately, I know that Congresswoman, you're very busy and you'll have to leave soon. So I would like for you to actually share the final remarks, and then we'll move on to a different questions that we have for the remaining time.
So just my closing remarks. So thank you again so much. We in Queens and the entire Asian American community are really thankful for the work that KAFSC does. And I can't, say that enough. And I'm also thankful for this space. I'm incredibly thankful for our API community at large here in New York and across the country. We have talked so much, probably more in this past year, to have these honest conversations than we've had in our entire lives, quite honestly. And I think that these conversations have been very necessary and very challenging. And I just want to say that I'm here for whatever is next in our path to true healing and we don't really know exactly what the next steps are, right? This is not something we have a guidebook for, or that we can Google on past events or, examples. But I just know that I really believe that it is up to each of us today on this Zoom to take it to the next step, beyond the initial Zooms, beyond the public rallies and standing together, which really demonstrates a lot of progress than even in years past. But we have to move forward in a real substantive way, be very intentional, and I'm always happy to brainstorm and participate, but be very intentional in what we are doing next together, the policies that we're pushing, making sure that we are fighting in solidarity to address discrimination and bias. Our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation are depending on us. They sacrifice their entire lives, pretty much, their adulthoods in many cases, so that we could have this opportunity. We have more tools in our toolbox sometimes in some ways than our parents did. So, I'm really encouraged that we are in spaces like this. And I really look forward to working with all of you to make real lasting change, to keep our community safe, and at the same time, keep other communities safe as well. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Congresswoman Grace, and thank you for the honest conversation and word of wisdom. And have a great weekend, by the way. Bye. So we'll move on to Alicia. I would like to also, I'm eager to hear your experiences of overcoming the barriers.
Yeah, I think in business, it's well studied and well known that women, minorities, and then also Asian Americans, there are a various number of stereotypes that can be very, very harmful, ranging from outright discrimination to, things that you might perceive as, is this in my head? It's a little bit more subtle. And I think over the years, as both Congresswoman Grace and Deputy Borough President Rhonda have pointed out, I've become more vocal. I've learned to really pick up on, when those instances are occurring, as well as how to really advocate for both myself, but really representing, all women, all Asian Americans, all minority groups. And one thing is, really correcting the bad thinking wherever it does come up explicitly, because, we have heard sometimes it can be brushed off as a joke. It can be brushed off as, oh, you're being sensitive, or, and you may feel like, I don't want to ruffle feathers, but, ultimately in a very firm and sober and calm manner, you can definitely point out where there is bad thinking and correct that. And I think that also really, especially, with Asian Americans in the workplace, sometimes I felt that in various places I've worked in finance and in consulting before starting Peach and Lily, that, it would be surprising if I spoke up in that way. And I think confronting and getting comfortable with that was something that I really, developed over the course of my career, and found that to be something, important to do. It's unfortunate that that's just something that's faced. Another tactic that has been really helpful is, when it comes to, any of these stereotypes, whether it's because you're a woman or an Asian American or both, there is sometimes things that are framed to you in an improper way. So for example, if I'm meeting with a potential investor, they may say, to a white male, your business is on this tremendous growth trajectory. That's fantastic. What will you do to continue that? For me, it might be phrased as, your business has been doing well. What will you do to prevent that from going away? How will you prevent, how will you continue to think about the competitive landscape? You're put on the defensive, right? And so I always take a moment to, I kind of pretend like I have this shield around me. I don't absorb those kind of framed comment that shows that prejudice viewpoint. And I will actually reframe it. And I will say, by that, do you mean, how will we continue this path of success, right? And I think that reframing is important both for me, others in the room, but even for this person. It really helps them have a paradigm shift. So, I think, there's still so much work in the realm of business to make it an equal playing field for Asian Americans, minorities, women. But I think speaking up, correcting the bad thinking, being bold, not being afraid that you're gonna ruffle feathers, are all important things to do, as well as advocating for those around you. And, really noting when there are discriminatory things happening and standing up for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the honest answer, Alicia. And I think hearing from all of you, all of us in this room could relate at some level. So I'm very grateful for the very candid conversation. And thank you for also suggesting some of the strategies that you've developed in order to overcome the barriers. So we've been hearing a lot from both of you, what you've done and what your visions. But I also want to hear, especially as a partnering organization, as an entity that partners with both all of you, what do you need from the community or other entities to help achieve your goals, and some tangible takeaways that had happened that were successful? So just wanting to hear from you what you need from us. Rhonda, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Thanks again. We are so grateful to you and everything that you do for the community. And we know that the Korean American community is largely located in New York, in Queens, with over 100,000 people. And we, just hosted a roundtable with Borough President Richards this week with Councilmember Paul Vallone. And so we're, very grateful for your continued leadership and partnership. To the Congresswoman's point, where our organizations are still in fledgling stages compared to working with the Black and Latino community, and with me and working in government for the past 20 years, it was always people in the Black and Latino community that mentored me, and the LGBTQ community that mentored me and gave me opportunities. And so I think one of the things that we have to continue to do is partner and have unity across all of our organizations, because, a threat to one is a threat to all. And so we're seeing much more of that. So in these meetings that we've been hosting, we're already seeing the networking happening. So again, we hope to continue to be, help with the convening and the partnership, and also financial support that's why we also created a nonprofits unit that's being led by Susie Tenenbaum that was just launched this week. So this is something that we can continue to do. As long as we'll keep our doors open, you keep yours open for the continued dialogue. But I mean, really, when you look at the success or temporary success that we've seen with the verdict with what happened unfortunately with George Floyd, it was a 17-year-old woman that took the footage of that, right? And so what we're asking is that as you listen to the panels, as you listen to our upstanding trainings, as you hear from us at our various town halls and marches, take it home with you. We need each and every, not just our community groups, but we need each and every member of, and each and every resident of Queens to actually become and live those values of using your, freedom of speech, ownership of your rights, being in America, that that we really put into action all these recommendations. So I think that like the Congresswoman said, I haven't seen this much activity in the community on these issues ever. So it's really inspiring, and I think that we're definitely getting there. But you know, what we saw really was just appalling and unacceptable, and we don't want this to be a continued thing that we see through happening to any Asian American groups. And as you know, after 9/11. We saw a lot of this, a lot of the hate and scapegoating directed towards the South Asian community. And I don't take it lightly that now we have a vice president that is of South Asian descent, because I do think that encouraged more people to be involved in politics from the community. And so I hope to see another, inspiration and seeing from the East Asian community that to become more civically involved. And so I'll make one more plug about that. We also created a new unit for civic engagement. After the work that the Borough Hall did with the census, all of those folks we worked with are now in part of this new group for civic engagement. So we hope to have more coming out of there. So I already think it's been somewhat of a success. I don't want to, be too hopeful, because unfortunately we are still seeing a rise in violence, against Asian Americans. I think that just by us sort of beginning to bond together, and not just across our own communities, but working across with other, minority groups, I think until we do that, we're going to continue to see this persist.
Thank you. I have to say, Queensborough President Donovan Richards, both Deputy Borough President Rhonda Binda, very welcoming of the community and really eager to hear from us. So I'm very thankful for that. Alicia, I would like to also hear from you what you would need from the community to achieve your goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're really grateful that our community of consumers and followers are really engaged when we do initiatives around specific give back programs and so forth. And again, I think it goes back to the notion that corporations can make clear and explicit their brand values and their values in general. And that attracts also a certain type of consumer and follower and so forth. And so people are really, it's this virtuous cycle where people are really rallying around it. So I would say that, when we do have those initiatives, really helping to spread the word so that we can give back as much as possible. And then I would say that right now, what I would love to see is, again, more businesses speak up. Words matter. We've seen that words matter when it's visible leaders, but also businesses, when they take a stance and they are explicitly condemning something or uplifting a certain community, that has this cascading effect down to individuals. And I would say that, for anybody who has a chance to watch this, if you are working at a business, whether it's your own or, you have, you're on a team or so forth, there are ways to advocate internally so that the company can step up and make a statement. And, sometimes when I talk to people in the business industry, they're like, well, speaking up, what does that do? But it does a lot. We've seen the damaging and also restorative consequences of words from leaders as well as organizations. So it matters a lot. And that's a first step, right? Beyond that, you can get very creative on ways to get involved and give back and make a positive impact. But as a first step, to speak up, because when you don't, that's also a choice, and that also makes a statement. So I would say to advocate, within your businesses to really, explain why it's important to make a statement and, not be afraid to state those values that a company might have. So that would be, something that I would love to see.
That was incredible. Thank you, Alicia. So the inclusiveness of other groups, the consistency of really speaking up, speaking out, pushing back, those all the experiences and stories that you've shared, all of you have shared, really inspired me to do more. So thank you. As I know we've been speaking a lot about many different things, and thank you again for the honest conversation. And unfortunately, it's almost 1:30, so I would like to hear the final remarks from both of you. Rhonda, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you. And so, this is a really hopeful and encouraging time. In my own experience and family, I remember I spoke up a number of times about, injustices, and I was not always listened to. So eventually I sort of, just kept a lot of things to myself. And so it's a muscle that we all have to learn. And sometimes for the first time, sometimes to relearn. But just know that we are here in solidarity. We need to work together across lines. The borough president himself, his father was just naturalized as a US citizen. He understands the immigrant experience. We have an assemblywoman Catalina Cruz, who's a dreamer and elected to office. And so we do have people like the congresswomen in government that are here to make sure that your voices are heard, but we need your partnership. We need you to report. We need you to speak out. We need you to advocate. It's really crucial to being to a full-fledged, American. That's part of what it is to, to be here. And it's not always, as I said, taught, in the process of coming to this country and becoming naturalized and so forth. And so, I would just end by saying that we at Queens, we're so proud of our diversity. It's tough sometimes because we have so much happening here. But one of the things that we're doing is we've partnered with the Queens Botanical Garden, and we are going to be planting the national flowers from the countries that our beautiful diaspora comes from. So the garden's mission will be a place where people, plants, and cultures can all meet. And so we are looking forward to bringing more people to Borough Hall, to share about their culture as things open up. And then next year we're hosting an event called Queens Rising, and it's June 2022, but it's really about celebrating all of the great culture that we have here that is really just priceless, and there's no place on earth like it. So, thank you for helping us to come out of the pandemic even stronger. I think we've learned a lot. But we learned how we can get better. And so we are not fighting until this uptick that we've seen is completely eradicated. And so just know that you have a fierce advocates here with the borough president and us at Borough Hall.
Thank you. Thank you so much for also the invitation. We'll be there. KFSC will be at the event.
Great.
Alicia, I would like to hear from you as well.
I am so grateful for all of the work that each of you are doing, because I think when I have conversations with individuals across the AAPA community, sometimes, especially if you're not plugged into all of the broader reaching efforts, it can feel a little despairing. You just see the escalation in hate crimes and in the bad news. And I think that for me, it's been really strengthening to know that we have advocates in government and just, in nonprofits doing the tireless work on the ground. And so whenever I feel that, collective effort, it makes you also realize all those drops in the bucket really gather to make a big difference. And so that's always been a takeaway whenever I have these broader conversations. So first and foremost, thank you so much for everything that you're doing with KAFSC and Deputy Borough President Rhonda. I mean, it is just unbelievable. I know it's tireless just work thinking about all of these various cultures and how to preserve that and really help fight for racial equity. So thank you so much. And of course, the work that Congresswoman Grace has been doing. I know that bill was presented a whole year ago. So it's been really wonderful to see that come to life. And I think, I just want to encourage, folks who are, potentially not involved in these broader organizations that, each of our individual efforts, even if we're not able to always see the broader picture, it is adding up. There is real momentum, and it can feel exhausting. It can feel like, is this going to make a difference? But anytime I have exposure to these conversations, it is just so strengthening because it does make a difference. And so, I just want to encourage, people in the AAPI community in solidarity across, all minority groups to really, really take heart that we can make a difference together. And, it's not just what we see on the news sometimes. So that's something that's been helpful to me. So thought I would share that.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for joining our conversation today to address what it means to be an Asian American, but also the allyship, building allyships with other groups, sharing your stories through personal challenges and barriers faced over the years, addressing racism, discrimination, and violence against the AAPI community. We commend you for speaking up and championing hope for a brighter future. Thank you for joining us, all of you, this afternoon, and have a wonderful, wonderful Friday and the weekend. Bye.